Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the No Silicast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, October 5th, 2025, and this is show number 1065. I'm a pretty avid reader. I don't read quickly, but there is never a gap between one book and the next. I've been a fan of reading on Kindle since 2010. While I do absolutely miss going to bookstores and literally judging a book by its cover, I still prefer Kindle. I also miss trading books with friends. I had a particular friend at my gym who would simply say, "Read this," and shove a book at me. I don't know how she found these books, but they were always winners. They were consistently books that weren't like anything I'd ever read before. After we both switched to Kindle, she never seemed to have a recommendation for me again. With Kindle, I have an infinite supply of books with me in a device that weighs just a few ounces. To steal a quote from No Silicast David Price, no matter how many books I put on it, my Kindle weighs the same. I could be in Zimbabwe and finish a book, download a new one, and keep on reading. I always think back to a vacation we were on in Mexico where Lindsay finished a book in the Twilight series. She was very young, and she desperately needed to read that next book. We spent hours driving around a resort town trying to find her that next book, all without success. That never happens if you use an e-reader. I have a pretty big vocabulary, a byproduct of being an avid reader, but I still find myself curious about new words. I love how I can press and hold on a word, and Kindle will give me the definition. Phrases and historical terms can also trigger a Wikipedia explanation, which is great too. For many years, my Kindle of choice was the Paperwhite. When they came out with the fancy new Kindle Voyage in 2014, I jumped on that one. It had a 6-inch 300 ppi screen, and I loved it. I read off the Voyage until 2017. I was happily reading book 2 of the Murderbot series when I came across the word verisimilitude. Not knowing the definition, I pressed on the word to highlight it, but nothing popped up. That was the last thing that poor little Voyage ever did. Since the display is e-ink, the page I was reading is still open to this day with verisimilitude highlighted for the past 8 years. I hang on to it because I keep thinking maybe someday it's going to fully die and then I can recharge it and just have it come back to life. Now, I tried reading on my iPhone with the Kindle app, but it was too much page turning. I tried to buy a new Voyage, but Amazon had discontinued the model. I tried reading on an iPad mini, but it was too heavy and far too distracting to ever get into the book I was reading. I finally figured out that Amazon was selling refurbished Voyages, so I bought another one and I happily started reading again. But like many of you, I love to have the new hotness. Whenever Amazon comes out with a new Kindle, I read all of the specs to see if I need to upgrade. The Kindle Oasis with its 7-inch screen sounded cool when it came out. Luckily for me, Amazon briefly had a pop-up store in our local mall, so I got to hold it in my hand back then. I say luckily because I absolutely hated that form factor. It was almost square with this giant bezel on the right-hand side, and it was really thick on that bezel side. It would have been very uncomfortable to hold with one hand and essentially impossible to hold with my left hand. Back to the Voyage I went. Finally, Amazon came out with a new Paperwhite with USB-C charging, and I thought that alone would be a good upgrade from the incredibly annoying micro USB connector on the Voyage. Charging the Voyage was literally an all-day event, and they promised faster charging over USB-C. Well, the Paperwhite is a great device with a lot of advantages over the Voyage, including a 7-inch screen, but it has one disadvantage. It's too wide for me to hold with one hand. I lie in bed, usually on my right-hand side, and I hold the Kindle with my right hand. I'm so used to reading like this that I actually chose the focal length of my human-made lenses for my cataract surgery to make sure I could read like this without glasses. The good news was that Steve, with slightly larger hands, was happy to take the new Paperwhite off of my hands. He did admit to me recently that his hand aches a bit after reading for too long of a time on that wider Paperwhite, though. Now, a few months ago, Pat Dingler and I were goofing around at Best Buy, and we went to look at the new Kindle Scribe. This is a competitor to the Remarkable 2, which lets you read books and annotate them with a stylus or write standalone notes. I played with the stylus out of curiosity, and I found it seriously lacking in responsiveness. I wasn't in the market for the device anyway, but it's still fun to explore options. I also looked at the ColorSoft Kindles to see if they looked like fun. I hadn't heard great things about them, and when I saw they were essentially the same form factor as the Kindle Oasis, that was the deal killer. Next to the Oasis on the display was a wee tiny little baby-sized Kindle. And I remember turning to Pat and saying, well, that's cute, but it's way too small. When I got home, I started poking around on the Amazon website, looking at the various Kindle options, and I found the plain, let's call it Kindle Nothing. It's got the same 6-inch screen as my beloved Voyage and a slightly smaller form factor. You can't squeeze the sides to change pages, which I always found difficult to do on the Voyage anyway. Amazon said that this new Kindle Nothing is 25% brighter. They didn't say brighter than what. Now, it's not a long shot that it's probably brighter than my geriatric Voyage, but guess what? This Kindle Nothing is the very Kindle I told Pat was way too small when I saw it in the store. Well, the Kindle Nothing with 16 gigabytes and ad-supported comes in black or matcha, which is an olive green color, and it's only $110. I don't care about getting ads, but I prefer to see the book cover to give me a 28% higher probability of maybe remembering the name of my book. I splurged and dropped an extra $20 to remove ads. At $130, it's a darn sight cheaper than the too big, poorly reviewed Colorsoft at $250. I'm pretty darn happy with the Kindle Nothing. USB-C makes me unreasonably happy. Now, we all know there's a 50-50 chance of getting the connector in the wrong way with micro USB, but you'd all back me up saying it's really closer to 90-10 getting it wrong. Charging is also dramatically faster on the Kindle Nothing over USB-C, so that's lovely as well. Now, power on the Voyage was on the back right towards the top as kind of a recessed button, and it always took me up 2 separate presses to get it to go off. The Oasis and Kindle Nothing have a tiny but easy to press button on the bottom. This is a good thing when you're sleepy and you want to quickly turn it off, but if you ever want to stand the Kindle up to read, like on an airplane, it will often shut itself off. I know we could add cases that would fix this problem, but then the Kindles would be bigger and heavier, reducing the joy that is reading on a Kindle. Another reason I wanted to update my Kindle was because the operating system was slightly updated on Steve's Oasis. With the new Kindle Nothing, I can now access font changes and light versus dark mode with many fewer taps. Is that right? Many fewer? Much fewer taps? Anyway, fewer taps. The interface is curious, though. If you tap at the top of the screen, you can see buttons for font, jump to pages or chapters, view your annotations, bookmark search, and a 3-dot menu at the top, just as you'd expect. But it also changes the display to show where the page you're reading is in the book by showing half of the page before and after where you are, along with a slider and more options to view and change your location. It's not a bad thing, but I'm not used to seeing that much information at once. In the old operating system, you still just saw your page. Now, here's a funny story. I complained to Steve that my Kindle wasn't charging and that it was stuck at 38%. I changed chargers, I changed cables. Just in case, I even charged where I was plugging it into the wall. I was off to write to Amazon to ask them for a replacement device when Steve noticed I was looking at the percentage I was through the book, not the battery charging percentage. Anyway, the funny thing is, this is just pure silliness on my part. The 2 numbers are in the same spots on the Voyage and on the Kindle Nothing. Well, the bottom line is that the Kindle Nothing is slightly brighter than my aging Voyage, slightly smaller so it's easier to hold, it charges with modern speeds and connection, turns pages more quickly, it's easier to turn those pages, and it has an easier-to-press power button, and it wasn't very expensive. I was telling Steve this whole story, and he had one question. He asked me, what does verisimilitude mean anyway? I told him I'm still waiting for my original Voyage to wake up and tell me the answer. I'm a big fan of Markdown, the markup language invented by John Gruber. If you're not familiar with it, the idea of Markdown is that you can write in plain text, but still produce a nicely formatted document. Instead of using clumsy menu picks to format your text, you use this little markup language, and it's a lot easier than using HTML. It's super readable, it's super easy to write, and it makes your documents portable. Now, the first reported sighting of Markdown on the No Silicast was in 2015, when Bart told us about this magical language during Chit Chat Across the Pond. My show notes on that episode are brief, but they outline Bart's points about the advantages of Markdown. And then they're followed by a section I entitled Allison's Rebuttal. In that, I whine about the syntax being too hard to remember. Gotta tell you, I'm nothing if not open-minded. Luckily, Bart is never one to say I told you so, even when he should. But over the years, as he's heard me rave about something Markdown can do or how lovely I find it about another great app I found that's Markdown friendly, He gets that quiet smile of satisfaction. Well, today I write almost exclusively in Markdown. The draft show notes are written in Markdown in Bear app, which is a lovely and inexpensive text editor that works on Mac, iPad, and iPhone. I start in Bear because it's cross-platform, which means I can sip my morning coffee in bed while writing articles on my iPad, and later in the day seamlessly switch to the Mac to keep writing. Bear lets me write in Markdown, but renders the formatting automatically for me. For example, if I put an underscore or an asterisk before or after a word, it renders as an italicized word. When I get the article pretty much finished, on the Mac, I choose Copy to Markdown from Bear, and then I paste it into MarsEdit to be published as a blog post. MarsEdit also lets me write in Markdown, and I get to see a live preview of the rendered article. And from there, I can drag in images, and MarsEdit formats them into the pretty figures you've come to know and love. It's a little bit more advanced in HTML than what you could do in Markdown. Now, I would start my articles in MarsEdit, but it only runs on the Mac. I'm so enamored with Markdown that I decided to teach it to the Screencast Online audience. I just finished the tutorial, but it won't air until late October. I've spoken often about how the best way to learn something is to teach it, and Markdown was no exception. I started by teaching some simple syntax, including double asterisk or double underscore for bold, double tildes for strike through, and asterisk with a space for a bullet and check boxes. They add double square brackets to the bullet. I ventured through building tables by hand, which is easy and fun the first few times, and then how to use a web-based table generator to save time. I taught some fancier stuff too, and while doing all this, I kept switching apps so the learners on Screencast Online could see how many different ways you can use Markdown. I showed, for example, how you can use some simple Markdown language in messaging apps like Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and Telegram, but notably not Apple Messages. Now, the reason I'm telling you all of this right now is because Apple made one big advancement in the Markdown world with the advent of OS's 26. You still can't write in Markdown in Apple Notes, but you can export notes to Markdown. The real joy for me of Markdown is writing in plain text, not using menus to flip back and forth between bold and not bold, but this is a step in the right direction. With Markdown export, your notes are no longer captive in that app. And perhaps more importantly, images in notes are no longer captive. Other than releasing your notes from captivity, having them in plain text Markdown means that you can open them in any text editor like TextEdit, BB Editor, Cut Editor. You can even open them in Markdown-friendly apps like my beloved Bear, which will make them captive again in a database, or my favorite standalone Markdown text editor, Typora. There are a bunch of Markdown apps on the iPad as well. Let's do a worked example of what happens when you export Apple Notes to Markdown. Creating our example note will require many menu picks where typing in Markdown would be easier, but bear with me as I go through it. You can do this experiment with me on iPad, Mac, or iPhone, but I did it on the iPad since I'll be able to show a few more cool tricks that arrived with iPadOS 26. We're going to use notes to create a heading at the top, a couple of bullets, a numbered list, words in italics, bold, and strike through. Then we'll throw in a table, a quote, and a couple of checkboxes. If we're feeling frisky, we'll even embed an image. When we're done, we'll export the note and image to the Files app and then see how it looks in a couple of other different Markdown apps. Now, to create a heading, we have to go up to the toolbar at the top of Notes and tap on the little AA button. If your window's too narrow, by the way, say if you're using windowed apps on iPadOS 26, you won't see the AA button, which is swell. You have to widen the window to see it. Across the top of the pop-down menu, you'll see Title, Heading, Subheading, followed by Body and Monostyled. We just want a big heading, so tap on Heading. Because I have an amazing imagination, I'm going to call my heading Heading 1. When you hit the Return key, the text formatting window will keep Heading and bold highlighted. But if you hit one more return in the note, it'll switch you to Body Style. In a life-changing enhancement to Notes, the text formatting window stays open now as long as you don't tap into the note. I'm not kidding. This is huge. Just keep typing and that little window stays open. It was one of the biggest pain points I had with Apple Notes. Since the formatting window stays open, we can click on bullets without having to open the tool again. Type something in as your first bullet, hit return, and it'll automatically create a second bullet. Now throw in a couple of line feeds because, as Brett Terpstra likes to say, Markdown needs the space. Then use the number button in the still open formatting tool to make a numbered list with 2 items. I've made a big deal about how you can't write in Markdown in Notes, but you don't actually have to use the formatting tool in Notes for bullets and numbers. Type asterisk, space, and then your bullet name, and Notes will automatically change it into a pretty bullet. Same thing with the numbered list. Type 1 dot and a space, and Notes will start a numbered list. Remember that space, though. You have to put the space between the 1 dot and what you want to type. This is just like typing in Markdown so far. Now, to create formatted text in Notes, we can do some of it with keystrokes. You can use Command-I for italics and Command-B for bold if you have a keyboard that you could do that with on your iPad. But if we want strike-through, we have to trot back up to the text formatting tool again. In that same menu, you can choose Underline or use Command-U. But if your goal is to create good Markdown, do that with caution. Interestingly, Markdown doesn't support underlining. Markdown was invented as a new way to write for the web, and underlined text signifies a link, not emphasis. We'll put in an underlined word just to see what happens when we export it to Markdown. I underlined the word underline, so I'll be able to find it when we get to our exported text. Tables are next on our agenda, and I have to say this isn't the worst part of Notes. In the toolbar, there's a dedicated table button. When selected, it drops in a 2-row, 2-column table into our note. It's easy to type in the cells, and you can even tab across and then down to keep filling it in. If you select a cell, you'll see 3 dots at the top of the column and 3 more dots on the left side of the row. If you press and hold on one of the sets of 3 dots, it selects the entire row or column, and you can drag it up and down or left and right. If you tap on the 3 dots, you get options to delete or add a column or row, change the formatting, and cut, copy, and paste. This works, but it's a bit twitchy when trying to create and modify a big table. Lindsay, the daughter, and I have a giant table in an Apple Note where we mark down what episode of Grey's Anatomy we've watched. After 21 seasons, this table, I should say, is getting big. When I created the table, I decided to put the latest episode at the top, but Notes insists on putting the added row below the selected row. That means every time I add a row, I have to then move it to the top, and then it's kind of twitchy. It's hard to get it to slide into place. I suffer, I really do. All right, our next order of business is to create a block quote. To do that, we definitely need a trip to the toolbar and our AA formatting button friend. In the bottom right of the dropdown, you'll see a button with a vertical line and a solid square to the right. That's the block quote button. I'll put in my favorite quote, "What problem are we trying to solve?" Now, checkboxes are easy in Notes because, like tables, they have a dedicated button. As soon as you tap that button, you'll get a hollow circle where you can type the action you plan to take. We'll make 2 of these and check just one of the boxes so we can see the difference in Markdown of an unchecked versus a checked box. Finally, let's drag an image into Notes because we are feeling frisky. If it dominates your note because it's huge, press and hold on it and choose View as Small. Now, if you're good at following directions, you'll find something like the image that I put in the show notes if you're following along with the text. All right, we're finally ready to see the magic under the hood with the new Export to Markdown capability in Notes. I have to confess that I had to ask Mastodon where the option was on iPad. I knew it was supposed to be there, but I couldn't find it. I looked at all of the buttons in the toolbar, and it wasn't there. Dan Morin chimed in to remind me that with iPad OS 26, we got another new thing. We now have a proper menu bar. Now, in my defense, you do have to either pull down very gently from the top of the screen to reveal the menu bar. You don't want to get your notifications. You don't want to accidentally get, Control Center over on the right. You got to do it in the middle. You got to pull down very gently. Or if you're using a trackpad, you can slide the cursor up to the top of the screen. So it wasn't that obvious. Anyway, the command we're looking for is under File, and it says Export as Markdown. You'll get a window that offers to let you share the new Markdown document or save to files. When the Save dialog box comes up, you get to choose the save location. For this demonstration, I chose the OneWriter folder in iCloud because that's one of the apps I'm going to use to show you how this looks after export, but you could put it anywhere. At the bottom of this little save window, you can see you'll be saving a folder, not just a document. You can change the name of that folder before you save. Another huge enhancement to iPadOS is that you can now choose what application to use when opening documents from the Files app. If I open the Files app to the OneWriter folder, I can see the folder created by Notes when we did the Markdown export. Inside that folder is the plain text file and a subfolder called Attachments. Inside that subfolder is the image that was embedded in my note. Now, this is a good time to pause and explain how images work with Markdown. Since Markdown files are just plain text files, the images can't really be embedded in them. They can only be referenced, and they do that with a link. Knowing that the image is in the attachments folder beside the text file is critical. If we reference it in the plain text file pointing to that location, but then later on we move the image, it would disappear when rendering the Markdown. If you long press on the plain text file on the iPad, the pop-up menu will include the option to open with, and then you'll see a list of apps that can open plain text files. OneWriter, or whatever plain text editor you choose for your iPad, will show you the plain text of your exported Markdown from Notes. Now let's go through what the plain text version of our Apple Notes shows us. The first line of our document was a heading. And headings in Markdown format are created with one or more hash marks. One hash is a heading level 1, which is the largest, and as you add more hashes, the heading levels get smaller. The first thing of interest is that even though we chose heading, not subheading in Notes, the exported Markdown isn't at heading level 1. It's a heading level 2. Not quite sure why they chose that in the translator, but it's something to keep in mind, because those headings are super important, especially for screen readers. When people are trying to follow along and figure out what's sub to something else, those heading levels actually really matter, so it's not just visual. Now next you should see our 2 bullets, which as I mentioned, are created with asterisk followed by a space. Then we see a line feed, and then 1 dot, space, and 2 dot space for our numbered list. Remember, we're still looking at the plain text, so everything looks great so far. Below that, we see very simple Markdown format for italics, which is an asterisk on either side, bold, 2 asterisks on either side, and strike through, the 2 tildes on either side. Told you about this earlier, and that's exactly how it looks exported from Notes. Remember, I told you that Markdown doesn't have syntax for underlining, right? Well, Notes just made up some annotation out of whole cloth, as Bart would say. It put 2 plus signs on either side of the underlined word. There are many variants of Markdown, but from my research of every one that I could find, this double plus annotation is not a thing. Remember this annotation when we look at how this renders. The table in the text file is the standard table syntax for Markdown, which uses pipes to separate the columns and hyphens to make the header separator row. So we're all good there. The block quote is standard too. All you have to do a block quote is a simple greater than symbol followed by a space. It's so easy to type and it's so readable. Now checkboxes are shown with a hyphen, space, and then a left and right square bracket. And you either have a space in between the brackets or an X between them depending on whether the task has been completed. Notes has exported this section perfectly with all standard notation. Finally, we see a proper Markdown link to the image, which is an exclamation point followed by 2 square brackets holding the alt text for screen readers, followed immediately by 2 round brackets which hold the image file name and the path to get there. Everything in our exported plain document looks in order, other than the phantom underlined Markdown. And OneWriter has a preview button that lets you toggle back and forth between viewing the rendered Markdown and editing the plain text. OneWriter shows everything beautifully rendered except for the imaginary formatting for underline that was created by Notes. It simply renders the double plus signs, treating them like any other typed characters. Now there's a wee bug in OneWriter which I just submitted to the developer, and it's at the bulleted list followed by a number list, even with the appropriate line feeds giving it the space, turns the numbered list into a bulleted list. So I just see 4 bullets in a row. So again, it's just a bug, and I'm sure the devs is going to get this sorted quickly, as OneWriter's in very active development. I think the last update was like a week ago. I'm equally sure that the developer has been super busy all summer working to make OneWriter work properly with the new OSs with rounded corners and menus and liquid glass. Now, just in case this was some sort of bug introduced by Apple Notes export to Markdown, I also opened the plain text file in another Markdown editor viewer for iPad called MWeb. Now, I'd never played with MWeb before, but it rendered the numbered lists properly along with everything else, including the tables. In both OneWriter and MWeb, the link to my image that's in the attachments directory at the same level as the plain text document rendered perfectly. Now, shockingly, I got much deeper into the topic of Markdown export from Notes than I thought I would. You can tell I'm having a lot of fun with Markdown, so I couldn't help myself. I'm evidently really amped up on this topic. I still wish Apple would let us write in Markdown, but the latest version of Apple Notes is a lot easier to use to format text, and having Markdown export means files are no longer captive. I almost forgot to explain something I mentioned briefly at the very beginning of this article. It's always been very difficult to get your images out of Apple Notes too. But with Markdown export of a note, all of the images in that note will be nicely exported into that attachments folder. This works not just with one Apple Note. You can select multiple notes, export as Markdown, you get all of the separate text files, and all of the embedded images will be filed in one attachments folder. I'm not sure that solves a problem for anyone, but it's still pretty cool. I hope this walk through Markdown export from notes tickled you to experiment a bit with Markdown. You know who's cool? Alan Danziger. That's who. Might be Dan Zeiger. I'm not sure. Anyway, he's still cool. He heard about the show from 6 Colors, listened to a few episodes, and already decided to donate to support the show through PayPal. How amazing is he? While we're talking about cool people, let me thank our supporters through Patreon since 2023. We've got Eddie, Lynn, Keith, Max, Adam, Chris, and Michael. All of you absolutely rock. Well, this week our guest is Adam Engst from Tidbits again, and I got to tell you guys, one of my favorite things about Adam is how much he is my people. Both of us get a topic, and we can't quite get the answer that we were looking for. We start digging and digging and digging, and then it becomes an obsession. And this morning, Adam, maybe even more than I did, descended into madness on part of our topic today. I'm glad I was able to...
I had work I was supposed to do. I was supposed to do something else.
But did you have fun?
Curse you!
It's not my fault. It's Apple's fault. But yeah, especially when the answer should be knowable. Right? That's the key feature.
What we were trying to do was, it was not fuzzy. It should not have been fuzzy. There should have been data that could be counted. Like in Sesame Street. One wonderful photo, 2 wonderful photos.
Exactly. Well, we're going to try to not start there. But if I know us, we're going to get there fairly quickly. And now if I can remember which of my 48 different text documents I use to do these notes. Oh, yes, it was in a Google Doc this time. Well, we wanted to start by talking about the iPhone 17 and versus the Pro and maybe last year's phone, and kind of talk about, Adam's holding up his 17, and I've got my 17 Pro here. And what the differences are and where you might want to think about making those choices. Is that a good way to tee it up, Adam?
Yeah, I think so. Where I came to this is that I had a 16 Pro. I've had a 15 Pro, and a 14 Pro, et cetera, because they're the best, right? You know,
it says Pro in the name.
It says Pro in the name, right? I am a professional. I don't just play one on the internet. And so, you know, for the longest time, I've been getting kind of the high-end phone because they're really better. And particularly when it comes to photos. And although I don't consider myself a professional photographer by any stretch of the imagination, I'm kind of a little offended by bad photos. You know, like I don't know very much about photography. I don't actually wish to know very much about photography, focal length, blah, 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 blah. Don't care. Just don't care. I just want good photos. And so I'm always frustrated when I don't get good photos for one reason or another. And, you know, obviously the iPhone's photos have been getting better and better every year. And Apple, for the most part, is on my side, right? You know, all the computational, you know, the cameras get better, the computational photography's gotten better. Apple's doing a lot of work behind the scenes, you know, 15 images, stitching them together, HDRs, blah, 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 blah. Don't care as long as it comes up with better photos. And so last year was the first year where I'm like, why am I getting the 16 Pro? Do I really need the 16 Pro? And then they said, there will be 48 megapixel macro photography. I love macro photography. One of my favorite things in the entire world to do is to stuff my phone into a flower and take photos. I have hundreds and hundreds of macro photos of the insides of flowers, which are really cool looking. They look like Vorlon space things half the time. And so I got suckered into the 16 Pro because of the 48 megapixel macro photography, which I then wrote a huge article about why it didn't help at all.
Oh, I don't remember exactly what was the issue with that?
Well, basically the problem is that you had to do a whole bunch of switching. I have this huge article you can find from last September that basically there's these kind of 2 macro modes in the iPhone. There's auto macro mode, which is what happens when you get close to things, which is again sort of the Apple way of doing things. But if you do that, you do not get a 48 megapixel photo. You get a 12 megapixel photo.
Oh,
And then there's this something I call the manual macro mode, which takes 48 megapixel shots. And for that, you've got to turn on HEIF max or RAW max. And then you've got to manually select the ultra wide camera, the 0.5x zoom. And so I mean, you do get a 48 megapixel photo then, but is it better? Not clear. And I had this article where I go through a whole bunch of stuff. And, finally, when I kind of came down to it, I was like, it didn't really seem enough better to me for someone like me who is not going to edit photos after the fact. Like if you're a pro photographer and you're going to be bringing this thing into Lightroom and as soon as look at it, then yeah, you probably want the 48 megapixel HEIF max or RAW max photo so that you can work on it. I am never going to do that.
you just want to shove your camera into a flower and get a pretty picture.
And believe me, you can do that. I have a lot of pretty pictures. So I just want to shove the camera into a flower and get a really nice picture of all the pollen and the stamens and the pistils, and oh man, the colors are amazing. It's just great. But it is one of those things where it turns out 12 megapixels was plenty for that. So basically, all my macro photos are 12 megapixels. And so
here
why do
you
I
went
have this
for the
big 48
pro
megapixel?
camera.
Yeah, why did I spring for the pro camera? And so this year, with all the changes that Apple made to the iPhone 17, including bringing that 48 megapixel ultra wide camera to the iPhone 17, I'm like, I don't think there's any reason at all to go for the 617 Pro this year. Not 100% true, of course. There are still improvements in the 17 Pro, particularly on the other end of the spectrum, where you've got the 4x and 8x zoom, as opposed to what did we have before, 3x and 5x, I guess.
Right, 3x and poopy 5x.
Poopy 5. Oh, I didn't see that in the interface. A little emoji right next to it. That's why it never worked
you
well
just
for
missed
me.
it. It was in there. Well, last week we did have Bart. Well, actually, I don't know when this is airing, so it'll be some number of weeks ago. Bart came on and we got into a real deep discussion that you would be bored to tears with of exactly how they're making the 8x, the 4x, the 35 millimeter zoom and all that. And
The
got into
cropping
all
it out
the
of the middle and
gory
blah, blah, blah.
details. Yeah, cropping out of the middle. And is that the same as if you took the other picture and then cropped it? And it got into all of those details. So we have just talked about that. But I think what was interesting in you looking at it is you were thinking about what photos make me happy.
Yes. Yes. And what photos will I be unhappy if I can't take? Or, do I want to be able to take? And it turned out there was no longer a plain versus pro difference there.
For
Probably
you.
wasn't the 16 either.
For you.
For me.
For you.
For
So
my macro, for the photos that make me happy, that I was not doing that. And we'll talk more about the other end of the spectrum on the zoom, because I did take photos using the 5x zoom, but they didn't make me happy.
So to make sure everybody's on the same page, the iPhone 17 versus the 16 got the higher resolution, bigger screen. It's 6.3 inches. It used to be 6.1. It got ProMotion and always on, personally, I don't understand why people are going crazy that it's got ProMotion, because I remember when ProMotion first came out and everybody said, yeah, I can't tell. And now it's like, well, it's got to have ProMotion. I got to have 120 hertz refresh rate, blah, 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 all that. I don't know that that one's as important as everybody thinks it is now. But now it's got better battery life. It's got a way better front camera. It's got center stage. It's got dual capture, which, by the way, they don't point out that dual capture is only on video. You can't dual capture a photo. You can only do, unless I'm missing it. It's only on video.
No, I think that's true.
It's got better stabilization. Both back cameras are now 48 megapixel fusion cameras on the 17. So maybe you'll get 48 megapixel photos when you cram it into a
well,
photo.
Well, I still won't, I think, because I think it's still wrong, but we'll see. I haven't had a chance to test that yet. I don't believe they've changed how the
Actually,
the
I took a
macro
bunch
stuff
this
works.
morning on my walk because of what you had said and what we were going to be talking about, so I'll check. It's double the storage at 256 gigabytes. It used to come with 128 when the 16, and it's slightly larger, but it's only 4% heavier. So it's got a massive advantages over the 16. And there isn't much different between the 17 and the 17 Pro anymore, other than that 8X camera. There's a few things.
That 8X camera. There's definitely some improvements. They fall into the, like, if you don't know what these words mean, when specifically, I have to look them up.
Like Academy color encoding. Aren't you going to use that? What about Apple
there something
Log?
called Genlock?
Yeah, there's Genlock. There's ProRes video recording up to 4K at 120 frames per second.
Yeah.
Not going to use that?
Yeah, I mean, here we go. Yeah, ProRes raw capture and Genlock synchronization. Okay, that's nice. Yeah. It posts into that. That's nice, dear.
Well, I think what you and I were talking about earlier is we realized, you know who the 17 Pro is for? Pros.
Well, I've written about this long ago, which I'm actually offended by that, because I am a professional. I'm simply not a professional videographer or a professional photographer.
Right.
I'm a professional writer, and journalist and publisher. And so I'm a little offended at the kind of the limitation of pro to a couple of very, very specific fields. Because there's things that as a professional writer and publisher and journalist that I would like to see changed, but I'm not getting any of that. So
I remember when Andy Anako was talking about the pro moniker, and he said, I'm a professional writer, but I could probably do my job on a typewriter today. It is a thing that you could do. And so a lot of the features, and I think that's one of the reasons that the MacBook Air has suddenly become not a shameful device to carry around. It's like, oh, I'm not a pro. I just have a MacBook Air. It's like, it does 98% of what I need to do. I do end up using my MacBook Pro for the podcasting stuff because I actually am a pro, Adam. But it's the same. I think it's getting to be the same thing with the cameras.
I'm a pro, you're a pro. And as I did, it's been true on the Mac side for quite a long time. I mean, I still remember when I switched from a Mac Pro to a 27-inch iMac.
Mm-hmm.
And the screen really sold me on it. I mean, that 27-inch Retina display. But the fact of the matter was that I was able to go to what previously had been in Steve Jobs' Matrix. The iMac was the consumer box. And so I was a little offended back then too, kind of in the, like, I am a professional. I need the Pro device, but I just couldn't justify it. And now, the Mac Pro is ludicrous. I mean, I'm sure there are people who buy one. I don't, interact with any of them on a regular basis.
So, John Siracusa has been tracking the single core and dual core performance of the Mac Pro that he has, which has the quadruple double secret Xeon processors in it, versus the iPhone chips. And the A19 has been now outperforms single core performance, and now it just barely beat dual core or multi-core performance of the Xeons in his Mac Pro. The phone chip is beating the Mac Pro now.
Precisely.
That's embarrassing.
And that's just it. It's, like the A19 Pro, I'm sure that's got more performance than the A19 in my iPhone 17.
Yeah.
Do I notice? No. I have not noticed a single thing. Admittedly, again, I don't do video. I don't play high-end games. I don't play any games. So those the things that might stress it, yeah, I don't do any of those things. But so it's just another example of why, yeah, pro means pro now, and unless you really are going for pro, that this is something that's going to change your work life, it's a much harder decision to just say, "Oh, I need the best," because you're getting stuff you don't, you're paying for stuff you're never going to use.
There's another piece to that. On MacBreak Weekly, they were talking about the fact that the new phones come with 256 gig, which is awesome. And Alex Lindsay, who is a professional video guy who does
Yes, he is.
crazy stuff, he said he is not going to buy the terabyte anymore. Because he looked back and he said, with the exception of like 2 recording events he went to where he did something bananas with like a, red 360, whatever, crazy thing he was doing, he has never even come close to 512.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
if Alex Lindsay doesn't need a terabyte, guess what? All y'all listening, you don't need a terabyte. and
I've I've been using 256 for quite a while because I bumped um I bumped over 128 by just a little quite a
so
few years ago. And then I'm nowhere near, I'm like, I don't know, 50 gigabytes or 70 gigabytes under.
I have a
So I,
theory.
you know,
I have a theory. And this theory, which is mine, says that people who have bought more and think they need more. So if you've got 512 right now and you look at your phone and you're using something more than 256, the reason, and Adam, you can tell me if I'm all wet about this, the reason that might be happening is because you have 512. So because of the optimized images in photos, it shrinks them down to fit the space allowed. It stops downloading them. It only keeps downloaded the size that will
oh,
fit, right?
hmm.
Isn't that true?
Ah,
I mean, I've got 110,000 photos, more than like 1.2 terabytes on my MacBook Pro because it's full res. I'm well under 256 on my phone. I'm convinced if I
yeah.
got 512, it would be using more than 256. I can't prove
It's
it.
an interesting question. I don't know if the optimization is adaptive. 'Cause that's what you're
Well, it
suggesting,
must
basically,
be.
correct?
It must be. If I've got
Well, no, but
1.2
it
terabytes on my
doesn't have to be.
Mac.
Well, it has to be it has to be giving you some kind of thumbnail,
Yeah.
on the phone, but it could just be, we give you a thumbnail that is, 200, 200K,
Hmm.
you know? If it's just set, then you could still run out of space with an optimized library.
It's possible. Okay, so I need to hear from somebody who's got a photos library that's at least 1.2 terabyte on disk with the full size images, and you bought a 512 phone, and tell me how much space you're using. That would be I don't do a lot of video, so that also might help.
Yeah, it's a tough one to pin down. I'm trying to think, how would you? Because it feels like what you'd need to do. Well, okay, so I have here, let me see. I am sitting here with an iPhone SE, which is I don't it's Tanya's old phone, so it is do, 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 do. Is it gonna tell me, what is it gonna tell me
Talk
how much space?
radio.
Okay, this is a 64 gig phone,
Okay,
and apparently I have 28.74 gigabytes available.
and
So,
how many images are on there?
well, it's my full library, right? I
Is it
mean, it's
really?
in theory all there. I
Ah,
mean, it should be.
because you
I
have
mean,
shared photo library between,
yeah, I use my it's a iCloud photo library. So
but
if I
it's a
go to years and I go back to, say, 2004 and I tap in, yeah, there's all the photos there.
yep. So I might be onto
So
something.
right, so if this fits, okay, so let's see. If I go into, what is it? It's general
To the audience while he's working, this is the
iPhone
madness that we
storage.
were describing earlier as we
Yeah,
facts and data.
yeah, you're
It's
making me do
knowable.
this stuff.
I'm
Where do they
not.
put their iPhone storage? Okay, 35 of 64 gigabytes used, and photos is using 9.2 gigabytes, whereas if I go to my iPhone 17,
With its 256.
uh, which is 256, 196 of 256 used, Photos is using, well, it's not that different. 11.43 gig versus 9.2 gig.
Huh. So
And that
adaptive, but
actually
not
that implies that there probably are some photos there are a lot of photos that I've taken on this phone that are
okay.
taking up more, they haven't been optimized yet because there is plenty of space.
Actually, so it's not as this is getting interesting. My photos library is taking 24 gigabytes on my 256 on the iPhone 17 Pro.
So not that much.
No.
Now what's really sucking space for me is music, where it's just cached a bunch
Well,
of stuff.
that's a personal
And
problem. Who uses music?
well,
Jeez.
it could just go away, I don't care, right? The only reason why I let it do that is because where I live, we don't actually have great internet access everywhere, and so it's annoying if you wanna play music in the car and you're in a dead zone.
Right, right. I just meant, why would you listen to music? That's what I was talking about.
Oh, oh, I didn't realize you were against music in general.
Oh,
Okay,
you've
now we're
missed a
good.
memo. We'll have to talk. The audience has heard way too many times that, no, I don't listen to any music at all, ever.
Okay, alright then.
So, let's see, where were we going with this? So we got into talking about this level, and Adam was saying, well, you don't need the 17 Pro because who would need the 5X? And I was like, I am all about the 5X. I take 5X pictures, I was about the 5X except for it being a poopy camera, and I was really looking forward to the 8X. So as soon as I saw the 8X on the 17 Pro, there was no other factor about the phone that mattered to me.
Right.
They could have made it with 128 and I would have bought it. They could have gotten rid of the wide angle lens for me. I don't care. I take some photos with it, but they don't make me happy. But what makes me happy is when we were on a lake in Michigan and the kids were out on an inner tube out behind the boat and we were flinging them around, was to be able to zoom way in on them and take really cool photos. And I got some awesome photos of them flying nearly to their death. It was fantastic. Love it. I
And they
take
weren't
pictures
blurry.
of birds. No, they were great. Now, broad daylight, like bright sunny day on a lake. There was
Yeah.
plenty of light.
Bright sun makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Uh,
I like to take pictures of birds far away, and those seem like rarely get a good one flying, but we'll see.
yeah, right. Look,
But
there's a bird.
sitting still, it's pretty fun. I love zooming in on stuff. I just love it. And
So
I'm never happy with my wide angle shots.
And so, in contrast to that, and we can explain how we got to this point. I discovered that I basically take two types of 5x zoom shots in the last year. I take a lot of race photos, people in cross country races, running races, which all come out badly. There's just almost no hope for, and I mean the iPhone has never taken a good action shot. I mean, I don't know what when Apple's showing off their stuff in the things, they have people skateboarding and doing tricks and whatnot, and they get these great photos. I think they're making it up. I mean, I cannot get a good photo of simple people running.
Now, are you running
And
while you're taking the photos? That would
no, I'm standing there. I'm like there.
just checking. Maybe you're bouncing a lot.
And I've tried, like from the side, from the front, and I can't control what the day is like. So sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it's cloudy. The cloudier it is, the worse the photos are, et cetera, et cetera. They're always blurry. And part of it is I always also need to zoom. One of the photos that I do edit are race photos because you often can't get as close as you want. And so basically it's this big landscape with a fairly small runner in it. And so I want to zoom in on the runner or the couple of runners so that you can see what's happening in the race for the photo.
Right.
And, the friend of mine who sometimes comes to our races with her lens that's this long, she gets good photos. So they're not fuzzy, and she can zoom in just fine with her 1.5 foot long lens. Well, maybe a foot long lens. So I know it's possible, maybe just not with an iPhone.
Right. Right.
But
Well,
anyway,
with a small
that's
sensor
type one.
size and zoom way in, you're not going to get a lot of light. So it's gonna be harder.
Right. And then type 2 is the serendipitous wildlife photos of, hey, look, there's a fox. We don't see foxes very often. So I have a lot of fuzzy photos of the backsides of foxes or turkeys or deer or something.
So you're not going to be able to do that with your new 17.
Yeah, but who cares? They're fuzzy anyway. I should throw them out. They're lousy photos. I mean, that's just it. It's like, if I try to do it and I get a bad photo, I'm no worse off than when I did it with a 5X and got a bad photo. So,
Right, right.
um, it's like there's really no. It's not like I'm losing anything. I'm simply trading one bad photo for another bad photo.
Yeah, what are the do you have you don't have a 4X, you have a 1X and a 2X and a point 0.5? Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. When I go into the camera app, I have 1X, 2X, and then I can get digital zoom up to 10X, which of course is
Don't
it's
do that.
digital. So
Don't do that.
which which isn't terribly different from what Apple's doing with the other one, but we won't get
Well,
into
you'll have to listen to the previous episode with Bart to understand why it is different. It's what I would do is I would take it at 2X and then crop it in photos or, and you'll get a better shot than if you do the, analog zoom
yes.
with your fingers.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Um, Now, I once, long ago, I sort of got on a hobby horse about this, and I was actually taking a lot of photos at different zoom levels, and then comparing them to the same photo taken at lower zooms than cropped.
Yeah,
And
did the
I
same.
decided that Apple was actually, um, if I remember correctly, I decided that Apple was doing some stuff in the zooming computationally to make it better than you thought.
Hmm. So when I was talking to Bart in this recent episode, as long as you're within the range of zooms that it wants you to take, that it shows you the optical zooms, scrolling between them isn't bad. So doing like on the iPhone 17 Pro, if you went to 3.8, that's still good. That's not bad. But
Mhm.
if you go above the 8X, then you're making up data. It's fake. It's not.
Oh, you are, but the question is are you make is Apple's computational photography able to make up data better than you would get by just cropping?
Well, you wouldn't be making any data up if you crop it.
Well, but in essence,
Well,
if
it
you
depends on how big you're
cropping
blowing
and
it
then
up.
zooming
Yeah,
and
but
then
we're not
blowing it
blowing
up,
it up
right.
on giant screens anymore.
No,
We're
no, but
looking
you
at
have to blow it
unlimited.
up to the same size as the
No, you
other and
don't.
then compare.
No, you don't. You have to blow it up as big as you need it to be. You don't have to blow it up to as big as it can be.
See, the other problem with all this is that what do you do with photos?
Right.
You know, like, that's the other thing here is, like, what do we really care? And so that's like, I'm a fairly great believer and I don't throw stuff out. So photos, I will really only throw out photos if they are truly bad photos, they're blurry, my fingers in them, whatever. Um, or if they're duplicates and I can't really tell the difference of which duplicate is better, like, oh, they're not, they're just so close, I'll just delete, all keep one. So, but the fact is, I only look at photos on my Mac or the Apple TV maybe or the phone. I don't print them. Like, that would be insanity talking.
Well, we should get
And,
into speaking of insanity.
yeah.
Now we have to talk about where we went next. So in ye olden days, I remember going into Apple Photos and saying, okay, make me a smart album that shows me all of the telephoto photos I took between this date and this date on this camera. And I had little drop downs and I could do that. And somewhere along the line in the last couple of years, it's become more and more obfuscated. And I posted out on Mastodon saying, actually, I haven't checked that yet to see if anybody came back with an answer, but we know they couldn't have. Um, whether there is
Right,
still a way
not
to do
possible.
that. And yeah, no, I haven't gotten a single response on that. And then I mentioned it to Adam in the notes. I wrote some little note about it, and that's where Adam lost the rest of his day, his
Oh.
morning, was
So
because
so I
there
had
seemed to
this
be a
idea.
programmatic way to do it.
Problematically programmatic?
Yes.
It's both. So I'd had this idea, right? Before I decided, before the iPhone 17 actually, before I had to make the decisions, so Apple had announced it, and pre-orders were not open. I was like, "Huh, I wonder how many 5X photos I took." And I
Yeah,
ran into
that's what we
exactly
were
what you
getting into the
said.
discussion. Do we really know how much we're using the 5X
Right.
versus
How
the
much
the
how
wide
much
angle?
do I do this? And I ran exactly I was like, well, there's aperture, there's camera model, there's flash, there's focal length, there's ISO,
There's
there's lens, and there's
lens?
shutter speed.
Yeah.
And and it's entirely unclear what even goes in some of those things. Because yeah, I
Oh,
I still am not
one
sure.
of my favorite things about that is I was trying to do it by lens, and if you put in iPhone 16 Pro and then you say lens, And then you'll get a drop down of all of the choices, or you can start typing iPhone 16 Pro and it'll fill in the options. But the options
look at
are
that.
longer than the field it's typing in, and you can't see what it's choosing.
Yeah, you're right. It's just this little
Little tiny window. You can't make it bigger.
Thing.
I started copying and pasting it out into a text document so I could see what it was choosing. But you would think the 5X, for example, it says it's 120 millimeters, right? That's what we learned today. Does it say 120 millimeters on that on any photos taken by that lens? No, it does not. So then you go, okay, well, 120 millimeters, that must be the 35 millimeter equivalent. So what's the crop factor on that lens? Unknowable, unless you take the answer and divide the two and get and surmise that value, but you can't do it programmatically. Right?
Okay, so if you hover over things in that little drop down menu, that you can't, it does expand them so you can read them all.
Okay.
There's iPhone 16 Pro back triple camera, 15.66 millimeters f/2.8. Okay. Hey, look at that.
Are you doing a smart album again, Adam? We don't know where you are. You're just off in your own little madness.
That's a smart album, and it actually looks like it may have found
well,
some of them anyway.
So what? So starting in smart albums, you've told
smart albums. So okay, so I've got lens is, and then I started typing iPhone 16 Pro, and then I chose the back triple camera 15.
But how did you find that?
0.66.
How did you find iPhone 16 Pro?
I was just scrolling. I just literally scrolled through the huge list.
Oh, you use the drop. Oh, okay. If you click the little drop down, it starts telling you.
Right.
Okay.
Then you get this. Okay, this is insanity. So
giant
this back triple.
Okay, we're now looking at a giant list, and we're scrolling through. It's got iPads. Even though I just told it I want it to be the iPhone 16 Pro, it's showing me every lens that I could possibly choose. So let's see, go, 16. What are we looking for now? We're going to look for so we've got the back camera 15.66, back camera 2.2, back camera 6.765.
I think 2.2 is ultra wide.
Well, so we don't know.
Yeah,
so this is where you have to know the answer in order to find the answer, right?
Well, see, we have somewhat different approaches here. You want to understand what the cameras are. I don't give a damn. I just want to map 1 to 1. I don't care.
Okay.
Like the 15.6, random, whatever.
Okay,
so
but I still don't know. I've got triple camera 15.66, 2.2.
That's the telephoto.
How do you know?
2.2 is the ultra wide.
You only know that because the madness we did before, right?
No, I know it because I know it in part because I'm now looking at them. I selected it. And so I can see that they're macro photos.
Okay, so there's like 26 different options for lens for iPhone 16 Pro. So tell me this, which one do you think is the telephoto 5X? The 120 millimeter equivalent is
the 15.
15.66?
Hang on, I just crashed photos. Yes, the 15.66.
Okay. Yeah, those might be zooms.
That is smart album.
It says there's 411 photos, Adam, and I think we know that there's more. Okay, so I'm going to let Adam keep enjoying his little. I would say tertiary dive into madness, but this is not tertiary by this point. So Adams went over
There's also a couple of 15s.
Stop it. He went to ChatGPT and said, okay, you got to be able to help us. Now, how did you go forward from there?
So I said basically exactly what we were just talking about. I want to identify which photos I have taken, and it said, yeah, you really can't do that with a smart album because Apple does not expose the EXIF data. EXIF is the metadata that's built into every image, with all the camera details that are associated with it. And it said, but there's this app called a command line tool called EXIF tool. And you can get EXIF tool, and luckily I didn't even have to use Homebrew. There's a download, although it's not signed by Apple, so you have to go through are you sure that you really want to subject your Mac to this super dangerous thing and
That
blah, blah,
sounds way
blah.
easier than brew install exif tool.
Yes, it is. I do not like command line installations of things. It
Ooh.
makes me nervous.
Oh, okay.
Um,
This is
so,
sorta like I'm in
so
the
in any event
opposite of Bartland right now, but okay.
yeah, right. So basically, then I went down the rabbit hole with ChatGPT.
Actually,
You
wait,
know,
let's stop for a second. Exif tool is a command line application. He
yes.
just doesn't wanna install it that way, so he's gonna go to the terminal to run it.
So yes,
Okay.
totally happy to, ChatGPT gives me things to paste into the terminal. And so we start going back and forth. And in fact, it finds this stuff. It finds that this information is in the EXIF data. But it's not necessarily what you'd expect. Again, it's not 120, it's 15.66 or something. And and so after, much discussion, it's giving me commands that I'm pasting in and trying to figure out the results and
Blindly,
all that.
without understanding.
Bl blindly without it's like, "Okay, I really need a script to do this." So I get a script out, and it's starting to kick out data, and I'm like, "Well, it's actually giving me numbers, but how do I check them?"
Well, I think what
Like,
was fun was you were doing it and getting stuff that looked like it might be reasonable, and then I would run it, and, we had a point in time where it was giving you, macro photos, and I looked at mine, and a bunch of them were not, and so that was when
yeah.
I think that the check on the other end helped you keep going, "Okay, what is it doing wrong?"
Well, and the problem is the ultra wide camera is used for multiple things. So you can just take
Mhm.
like a big landscape that's super wide with the ultra wide camera, or you can zoom in a lot and use it for, like get really close to the inside of a flower and take a macro photo, and they're quite different.
Right.
And
Oh, and that's where you found a secret value. It
yes,
was
it's like
there's a value
there's a
greater than or
like
equal to
focus
80
distance.
or something, and I
Yeah,
asked you what
like
were the units, and you said magical units or something.
yeah, right. Things. There are
Things.
things. Um, yeah, it appears to just be a number that Apple sort of sets.
And that
But yeah,
that
it's like this focus position,
yeah,
I
focus
think is what
position,
it
and that turned out to be critical because that allowed you to separate out once you found what that was, we were able to find the one for 5x versus the, ultra wide.
yeah, yeah. Well, no, that was that gave me the difference between a true ultra wide and a macro ultra wide.
Oh, is that what it was? Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah, right. So, because the 5X are actually easy because they're a different focal length. Um, so yeah, I mean, if you actually tell EXIF tool to like dump all the EXIF data for an image, you'll get pages and pages
Yeah,
of this stuff,
yeah.
which you don't read at all. You paste it into ChatGPT and ask it to make sense of it, because it's just again, this is the sort of thing where I do not wish to become an expert in this stuff. I simply want an answer of how many macro photos, how many telephoto photos, et cetera, et cetera.
But the
And
best way
so
to do that was I thought you came up with something really inventive, or you prompted ChatGPT to come up with something inventive, was if it gives me these values, and we do end up with a table with the script that you ended up with, we have a table of the names of the different lenses or cameras and how many of each photo, but the way you got it to allow you to verify, I thought was really
yeah.
interesting.
The verify, that was the key because that was the problem. It gives you these numbers, you're like, "Well, I don't know. That sounds good. Is it right?" How
Mhm.
do you again, everything with a chatbot, how do you prove that it's right? And so, I mean, I didn't doubt that its code was doing what the code was supposed to do. I didn't know if it was doing what I wanted it to do.
Right.
So, along with the little table of numbers, I said, "Put a folder on my desktop, and inside that, make a folder for each of these cameras." And two for ultra wide, one for ultra wide, and one for macros, the true macro photos,
Mm.
and then symlink the photos from the iPhoto the photos originals library. Because where all these things sit on the disk in general.
Right.
And the beauty of the symlinks, they don't take up space, because they're just a Unix thing. But because the Finder sees them as real, you can use quick look. So you can just, hit the space bar and then use the arrow keys to kind of zoom through them going, yeah, 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 yeah. Ooh, that one's really wrong. Why is that wrong? And anyone that's wrong, you can say open in preview and then look at more of the EXIF data in preview. Preview actually shows you much more EXIF data than Photos does.
Right, right. So I love this script because it creates these buckets into a folder and then puts the symlinks into the buckets, and he's got it for macro, ultra wide, wide, telex 3x, telex 5x, and what was the last one? Scroll other, which gets we'll get it interesting in that. I had a little trouble running it at first because I did not have Terminal did not have full disk access, so I had to.
Oh, yeah.
I actually asked ChatGPT.
I must have given it to it at some point. Yeah.
I had to ask ChatGPT, why am I getting this error? Why can't it run this command that it's working for Adam? So got it to work out.
And selfies. It also gives you a folder for selfies.
Oh yeah, selfies. That's embarrassing. Steve and I are big old selfie people. Actually, here's a question. Do we have the originals for photos taken by other people in our shared photo library?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So I could blame all these selfies on Steve.
Yes, you could do that. So, in fact, one of the other things I ran into was I had this weird other category, and when I looked at them, I didn't quite understand them. And at some point, because I also keep in mind, I have 10,000 photos from the last year, so I set the script so you could set it to run only on things since a certain date, so limit it to something reasonable. And what I realized is like I had a bunch of photos I took with my iPad because I was documenting the process of transferring data from the iPhone 16 Pro to the iPhone 17.
Oh, and you needed another camera.
I needed another camera, right? Precisely. And similarly, Tanya's old iPhone SE, which I'm using for various things, a few of its photos were in my library, and so I also had it go and parse out, all the other devices, which was kind of interesting.
Right, and that's where we came across, I realized I was looking at this one, it said it was taken with an iPhone SE 2nd generation. I don't even know anybody. Oh, I looked at the photo. It's my friend John Zellner. He took a picture of some of his art, and he shared that photo with me through a text message.
Yep.
So things
as long as the metadata is still in the photo.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Now it would be interesting because the one thing that people have gotten into being a little careful with metadata sharing is location. So sometimes you do not want your location metadata stored with the image when you're sharing it. But so you can end up with some things there. Unfortunately, as we discovered when we were looking into it just before starting the show, it's still making some mistakes. Like there's photos which it's identifying correctly as being from a different camera, but they're not in the date range that they should be allowed.
Well,
I don't know why that is yet.
I haven't confirmed what Adam's seeing. One of the problems is the symlinks are not, they all have today's date. So we can't tell the day the photo was taken. For some reason, a lot of my photos are showing date last opened, which appears to be correct, but a lot of the photos were apparently never opened, is what it's saying. So I don't know what that means. But you said you found photos that were clearly from a different time.
Yeah. I've got ones that are just, they're from 2 and 3 years ago. So they should, all my tests were at least in the last year, and most of the tests were before then. So there's something going on there, which I have to figure out with ChatGPT and see why it's doing it. ChatGPT and I have gone through a number of iterations on the architecture for this script. And so, because at various times it's done things that are also really, really slow. It's now down to slow, but not painfully slow. So there are, basically, if it has to parse through all 48,000 images in my library, that tends to make it problematic in the terribly slow.
Yeah, it took about, 10 or 12 minutes to go through around 5,000 photos for me. Now, the other thing we found interesting was this process, this shell script he has it as written as of this instant in time is 5,444 photos. I made a smart album of iPhone 16 Pro photos from that time range. Actually, I got to double check how that worked. It's not the same number of photos, though.
maybe that's people who gave you photos, other people who gave you photos. If you did I-16 Pro, if you didn't do
So
just if you didn't do just photos from the last year,
so photos
because you tried to
from
limit
the
it to
same
16
date
Pro.
range, iPhone
Yeah.
16 Pro was 5244, and just the 16 Pro ones from the script is 5013.
Huh.
So, it's
Huh.
different.
Hmm. Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
um,
It's just, I mean, at least there you could go through the smart album and scroll, and then, zip through in Symlinks and sort of see if something jumps out at you. A couple hundred is enough that maybe you'd be able to find one fairly quickly that didn't appear to be in both.
yeah, I don't know how I'm gonna find I'd have to look through all 5,000 photos in both to be able to see what's
Yeah.
not there.
For in my libraries, I tend to have, relatively like 1 or 2 photos here and there, and then 150 photos from the same event, like a
Mhm.
race, frankly.
Okay.
So for me, it's usually relatively obvious when I've got something that's like, "Oh, what is that? That seems wrong." Or I recognize the people in it as could not have been in this year, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm willing to flip through 5,000 to see if that's right or wrong. Um, so
Oh,
let's
come on. You got the bone.
I do have the
Worry that
bone.
bone to death.
Uh, so let's assume that it's close on what you've got in terms of how many of these 5x photos you took, poopy 5x photos.
Mm.
How does that compare to how often you're using the macro mode?
Um, so for my numbers, let's see. It says that the macro I've taken 265 real macro photos.
Mhm.
The telephoto 5X, it says 386, but again, those are race photos, so there's probably 15, 20 in there that are like wildlife, blurry wildlife shots. Um and the bulk is really the normal camera. So and then as far as ultra wide but not macro was like 50. So there's a few there. I mean, I'm relatively infrequently saying, "Oh, I want a fish, I want the big wide image of some kind of landscapey thing." So
Um,
so in essence, yes, it told me what I wanted to know.
I just realized looking at your data one more time, and I hate to keep going through numbers people can't see right here, but those numbers don't come close to adding up to 10,000.
No,
Those
it it
numbers
it
add up
got
to like
confused.
1,500.
I think you have to add up all the ones in the others to get to the 10,000, and that's why I was like, "Oh, crumb, it's gone and gotten something confused again."
Yeah.
It's always
Yes.
had that 10,470 number, but I'm not sure what that's based on. It's also now that I'm seeing some older images that are not from the last year, I'm wondering if its date checking is looking at some date other than what we think
Like a
the date should be looked
modification
at.
date instead of a
Precisely, a
yeah.
modification date or a last open date maybe, I'm not saying that's it specifically, but there may be it feels like there could be something that it's getting confused about. What's so fussy about this is you can't just, like, look at the EXIF data for a file quickly and easily. I mean, like, you have to use EXIF tool to look at that data and or preview maybe if you're lucky, but, it's a lot of black boxy things where you're kind of pulling at
So
strings and
you've gotta
seeing
look
what
at
comes
ones
out.
that are find ones that are wrong, look at them to try to figure out where the algorithm got it
Right,
wrong. Now,
right.
so mine is fairly close. It's around 5,016 Pro photos taken in the last year, and, like I said, 5,244 or something like that, in photos, so that seems fairly close, and it found that I took almost the same percentage of macro, selfie, and 5x photos.
Hmm.
So but
So,
again, the zoom really makes me happy. So, I
yeah.
guess
So it was not that many photos, but when you wanted it bad.
well, it's still a fair it's like 8%, telephoto, the
Right.
5x telephoto, and if you have the 3x and the, sorry, oh, wait, this can't be right. Now it says 3x is 0. This is not what
Yeah,
we're looking for.
I was gonna say these droids, there's something that it's this was definitely not something that was ready to
To talk to?
disseminate. Well, you could talk about it, but definitely wouldn't want to show other people this stuff,
Oh, there is no
because the
2X.
numbers aren't. Hmm?
There is no 2X camera on the 16 Pro. I'm sorry, there is no 3X. There's a 2X.
Yeah, I wonder how it got that.
That's probably
confused.
how it found 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we might need some more massaging on this. Can we trust that you'll continue to obsess a little bit more?
Maybe, although I'm not quite sure. I do have to get some other stuff done, and man, does this suck the time, because part of the problem is that it can be quite tricky when working on this sort of thing where you have to be constantly moving it out to be able to work on local data. Um, and ChatGPT is not really good at changing just little itty bitty things
Oh, yeah, you put it
that.
in and then it changes 4 other things when you're not looking?
Right, and so sometimes you change it, you're like, "Oh, crumb, now we've gone backwards." Because that's why I'm a little annoyed, is because we actually were getting some better numbers out of this.
Yeah,
Um, but I was focusing on the symlink stuff, I wasn't focusing on the actual numbers.
right.
And
Well,
so
if you do continue to obsess, can you have a date make it a date range, not just a start date? Because I wanna capture the 16 Pro photos, and I know the dates that I had the camera, that I owned that one.
Right, precisely, yeah, we can do a date range. The other thing I was thinking is what it would really make sense to do is to have, like, the symlinks, have a top level folder for each device, and then inside that folder have the different lenses each for each the device even,
There you go.
if they exist. So,
Well, I
I
think
mean,
it's
maybe
pretty
that's too much.
even though it's got the wrong answer, which God bless AI always being wrong. Even though it's got the wrong answer, it is a creative solution that it creates these buckets. I like how it does that, and it creates them, and then it puts the sim links in. That was really clever. I like that. But like you said, maybe not ready for prime time. But I think the
Yeah,
bigger, wider point you wanted to make was that looking at your usage, maybe the correct answer isn't how many photos did you take at the different focal lengths. The real
right.
answer is what photos made you
Is
happy.
right.
And
Yep.
if they were all
And yeah,
5X, then you better get that 17 Pro. But if you really like shoving your camera into a flower, maybe that ultra wide is the one that you really care about, and you don't care about the zoom.
and it's not gonna make any difference if you're on the 16 or the 17 or the 17, or the pros. So,
Right.
and that's I do sort of, I mean, now that I've gone this far down the rabbit hole, I do kind of wanna get it so that it at least feels like it's accurate, because I think the numbers are interesting.
Yeah.
They really do reveal something, and the Symlink approach is interesting too, because the numbers do not tell you if the photos made you happy. That's part of it, is I went and looked at all my 5X photos and go, "Oh, those are all terrible." Or, like, literally those photos made me disappointed. I
Hmm.
thought I had taken good photos, and then when I look at them, I'm like, "Oh, they're all fuzzy again." And so it was distressing. And whereas on the other hand, I look at my macro photos and I'm like, "Look at that flower. That's a great looking flower."
One last thing on taking flowers, I tend to back up and do it with like the 2X to get a nice fuzzy background. I like the shallower depth of field than what the macro gives me. Because almost every flower I see is in an urban environment, so you're going to see like somebody's garage door or a power line in the background or something. But if I can get far away and zoom up, I can actually obscure the stuff in the background a little bit and make it a little bit prettier.
You're not getting close enough. My flower shots have no background.
Uh,
I'm going all the way in, like, it's all color. The whole thing is color.
I do
Uh,
some like that, but sometimes I
eh,
like the flower. So anyway, I guess the answer to all of this is your mileage may vary. And since there is some time before this will go live, if Adam comes up with a script that he is happy with and we think that it is vaguely close to the right answers, I will put it into the show notes. So this was fun as always, Adam. Last night we weren't sure what we were going to talk about, and we managed to find a lot of fun to talk about here.
Oh, there's always something.
All right, if
Always
people
something.
want to learn everything Adam has in his brain, it all comes out at tidbits.com. Is that right?
Maybe. That of which it does come out, because there are definitely times when I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not writing an article about that."
Okay, all
That
the news
didn't
that's
actually
fit to
solidify
print.
well. Yeah, right, precisely. Fit to print is the question.
All right,
And,
Adam.
I hope this turns into one, put it that way.
All right. We'll talk to you soon, Adam. Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, that is going to wind us up for this week. Did you know you can email me at allison@podfeet.com anytime you like? A lot of people do, and I love talking to the audience. I just love it. If you have a question or a suggestion, even if I said something wrong, and I bet I said at least one or two things wrong in that Markdown thing because I don't know everything on it, you should write to me and send it on over to allison@podfeet.com. And remember, everything good starts with podfeet.com. You can follow me on Mastodon at podfeet.com/Mastodon. If you want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, you can go to podfeet.com/YouTube. If you want to join the conversation, you can join our Slack community at podfeet.com/Slack. In there, you can talk to not just me, but all of the other lovely No Silicastaways. Yop has been putting some really funny stuff in the Delete Me channel, so he's kind of challenging Alistair right now. Anyway, you can also support the show at podfeet.com/Patreon or with a one-time donation at podfeet.com/donate with Apple Pay or any credit card. Or you can do podfeet.com/PayPal like the delightful Alan. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, head on over to podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time and join the friendly and enthusiastic No Silicastaways. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed.